much for being here, and special thanks to Caroline Rush and the team at the IPF for having us. It's been a huge privilege to author this report. I'm Mary Fellows, CEO and founder of Greenwith Studio. As it happens, I've just flown back from COP27 to be here today, where the ripple effect around the rooms out there after Antonio Guterres from the UN said that we were on a highway to climate hell with our foot on the accelerator resonated around the conference. We all know that fashion globally is responsible for about 10% of the carbon, about 20% of the water pollution in the world, and is anecdotally known as the third most polluting sector. One of the panels I spearheaded over at COP was called Outsider and Nature, and the reason I called it that was to try and summarize how, when fashion comes together with science to copy Mother Nature's circular systems, we might be in with a chance to bring it right down in line with wider net zero goals. My thinking was that I've been inspired, like I'm sure many of you in this room have, by the same feeling I had when I was back at St. Martin's of seeing a McQueen show. I've now found when I've talked to people who are in the laboratory, and I think the punks and the pioneers of fashion of the future are going to be in the laboratory. So I invited David Shuckman, who's been the BBC's science editor for a long time, as an eminent environmental correspondent, to moderate my panel. And after about half an hour of talking to people such as Dr. Amanda Parks from Pangaea, Nicholas Kirkwood, the shoe designer who's in the middle of really changing his business, and some other people, David just sat up and said, "I'm so sorry, I don't really know about fashion because I deal with the environment, but surely when everything I'm listening to, doesn't fashion just need a QR code?" And I went after him after the panel and said, well, funny enough, that's been a very key finding in the report that I've been authoring. There's an adage that fashion shouldn't mark its own homework. It's like the old adage in the literary world of show, don't tell. What does it mean? It means that when you examine consumer behavior with garment longevity, that really if fashion was able to give the same traceability about its inputs as you can now get when you buy food, that we might not have the problem we have. If you take this example of what I'm wearing today, this necklace I bought in the green zone from a group of women who have a collective called the Sinai, the Women's Cooperative, and they made this necklace and showed me how they made it, compared to the white shirt I bought on another business trip when I suddenly realised I didn't have one and I grabbed it at the airport from a fast fashion retailer. I know exactly where my necklace came from, but I have no idea where my shirt came from. And I know which one I will cherish more, and I think if that was applied across the industry, we'd again have a lot better chances at sorting these problems out. So what we found in the process of this research was that when you can give that traceability using the emerging technology and software about the raw materials and processes that go into bringing the product to the customer, but also what happens after it's in the hands of the consumer, that is where we're going to find change. And this report was to really look at what happens in the consumer's hand, because as the British Fashion Council pointed out with their circular fashion ecosystem, the target state is a circular industry. We know that digital product passports are going to be a reality soon enough, and with them not just showing the traceability and the transparency, but helping the consumer become a custodian of a product in partnership with the manufacturer or the retailer that got it into their hands, right through so that they together can see that where this product goes in the course of its life, in its care, its maintenance, its repair, and hopefully not its disposal, but it's either recycling or resale. We have the capability, we have the data, and all those processes and systems in place, so we have an exciting future. And with that, I'd like to say thank you to my panelists for joining, and if you'd like to introduce yourselves, please, and then we'll get on to our questions.
Hey, I'm Patrick McDowell. I'm founder of my namesake label and sustainability design director at Pinko. I started my own label after working in the industry and thinking that it didn't make any sense, and thinking that I could start something that did apply common sense to something that I've always loved, which is clothes.
Thank you, Mary. My name is Paola Arbeláez. I am the Global Category Director for Vanish. And at Vanish, we are a stain remover and a laundry booster with presence in more than 70 countries around the world, which is pretty much like 65 million consumers. So we actually have quite a unique perspective coming from the consumer angle, because we know them inside in, inside out, and we know their consumer practices when it comes into caring and washing their clothes. So actually, laundry is a key part of the fashion sustainability cycle. So this is why we are so passionate about our purpose, which is to help clothes live longer lives. And we are really trying to work to find an ecosystem of partners that can really help us to really inspire consumers into drive consumer behavior change when it comes into buying, carrying, but as well disposing their garments, so we can actually help to transform the fashion industry.
Thank you. Talia.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tanya Wadisa. I'm founder of CyCon, which stands for Circular Concierge. It is a one-stop shop for wardrobe maintenance, which connects garments with services around the full cycle, such as care products, clean, repair, rent, resell, donation, and recycling, closing the loop in the system. And I come from a sustainable energy sector of 15 years, where I realized a few years ago that sustainable energy is actually a success story in the whole transition to the cleaner, better world. But the third, arguably second, dirtiest industry in the world was fashion. A data geek at Bloomberg, I started Googling and digging the data for what really is available on fashion, and there was absolutely nothing. Nothing in legislation, supply chain, transparency, CO2 emissions, zero. And this is where I understood that fashion was actually about 15 years behind energy when it comes to transparency, sustainability, availability of solutions in supply chain, legislation, and ultimately consumer awareness. And and this is where
Thank you. Great.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Nikita. I head up the Mills Fabrica, which is a co-working space in King's Cross. We also have a incubation and investment fund where we aim to invest in companies that can make systematic change throughout the fashion industry from a supply chain, manufacturing and production side. But previously to the Mills Fabrica, I was at a company called Parley for the Oceans, where we biggest ocean cleanup network on the planet, collecting up all the plastic from the oceans and upcycling it. But it was quite key to this conversation because there's a lot of conversation around traceability, about where that plastic came from. And then before that, I was at Avery Dennison, which is the biggest supplier of RFID chips and NFC chips in the fashion industry, which is obviously what we're going to be talking about today, and it's going to be helping towards the garment longevity and understanding what's in our garments as well.
Absolutely, thank you very much. And let's start looking at one of the key findings in this report was that we have in fashion about a third of a product's in footprint on the environment and impact comes post-purchase. Laundering, repair, care, and or resale, and hopefully in time recycling, upcycling and downcycling. Anything but being thrown away, which is currently at 1 million tonnes on average in the UK. Consumers are wearing each garment about 40% less than they were a decade ago, but about average 10 times. And one of the things that was extremely interesting for us was talking to Vanish about all of this amazing insights and research they've done into this exact problem. And Paolo, would you like to tell us, there was some research showed that the key reason for disposal was things being worn out, is that right?
Yeah, that is right. We have been really trying to understand what are the reasons that would lead a consumer to really dispose garments. So it's very interesting to understand that the number one reason is actually material worn out. So the quality of the garments are not the same as they used to be before. But also things like colors fading and even a stain. 1 in 2 garments are disposed because you couldn't remove the stains, and it's so easy to go out there and buy a 5-pound t-shirt again. So we really want to enable consumers to understand how we can drive this longevity to ensure that some of the garments we already own in our wardrobes can really have second lives.
Thank you very, very much. And I mean, if we take that into account, then the problem isn't just the demand, right? We know that people are buying way too much and throwing things away way too quickly, but so we hear that the problem also is with the supply, because the supply is not up to what it should be. So with that in mind, if longevity and durability are built in for greater utility to bring down fashion's impact, Patrick, it brings me to you. What role would you say as a designer can be played in the pre-purchase part of fashion and also the post-purchase in terms of designing for durability and ultimately circularity?
I mean, there's parts of sustainability that we all know, like monofiber garments and designing around the practical parts of sustainability, right? But there's also emotional connection to clothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we talk about the elephant in the room, usually, which is the fact that we produce too much, and actually, if we just produce what people actually wanted to buy, we've immediately changed the system dramatically, and we've also connected with the people that are buying the pieces because we've made stuff that they actually want. They've ordered it and waited for it, and then are connected to it. It fits them properly. It isn't too long for them. It's not falling off the shoulder, or maybe it is because that's what they wanted it to do. And so suddenly we go back to something that we used to have a long time ago, where people actually have things that fit them properly and work for them. And so I think it's really important that we're looking at materials and designing in a way that we can kind of redesign and repair, but also as a designer making special pieces that people actually want and can connect to. And then because you're doing that, you also have the time to offer repair and redesign services as well. So I think it's really important to flip how we think about how we make
the design process
yeah.
in its entirety. Thank you. And Nikita, I know you've got some experience with this because when you were working with Parley for the Oceans, they collaborated with Adidas on a loop shoe. And could you explain how that worked? Because that to me seems like a great metaphor for how fashion could be designed.
So we didn't, actually it wasn't made out of ocean plastic, but it was the loop shoe from Adidas, and it's actually made out of virgin TPU, but it was all one material from the sole to the eyelet, to the tongue, to the upper. And the idea was that, is that basically it had a QR code on each shoe, is you wear that shoe out until the very end, and then you take that shoe, and to get another pair, you have to return it, scan the QR code, get the new pair of shoe, so then you will always just have that one pair of shoe. You don't need numerous pair of shoes sitting in your wardrobe, and then that shoe gets taken as it's only one material, chopped up and recycled up into the next pair of shoes.
Fantastic, thank you very, very much. Tanya, to that point as well, how do you think technology can then, obviously if you've got design, such as Patrick and Nikita have outlined here, what role can technology play in the post-purchase process and part of this to help solve the problem?
Great question, thank you. I'll start with a recent RAB report, which a lot of you might have read, where it says that a huge percentage, there was a large disparity between consumers, customers, who want to be sustainable, who claim to be sustainable, but actually in reality are not. So the purchases they make are actually much less sustainable than they want them to be. And on the other hand, there's the EU Green Deal that has been unveiled in March this year, requiring companies who want to trade in the EU to have digital product passports. Now, what we find is that digital product passports are an amazing opportunity to communicate with customers the story, the effort that the company has gone through, the analysis that they've done, the achievements that they've, the achievements in the supply chain communicated through the impact in the product passport, the story, the visuals, and the way that they connect this product to the post-sale infrastructure, such as buying care products based on the materials, the care instructions that this garment particularly needs, because wool needs completely different care products compared to cotton and polyester. Or cleaning, for example, what dry cleaner do you go to? Do you go to the one that uses PERC, which is highly toxic, or do you go to the one that uses, silicon-based products, or the one that uses simply water technologies, such as Oxwash, for example? We talked about it. So there is an amazing opportunity for brands to communicate that story and connect their products to that infrastructure of services. Meantime, there are consumers who are now open to this amazing range of technology. For example, you have an app right now for repair, you have an app for cleaning, you have an app for renting, for reselling. You Google where do you recycle this, and there was a point where I ended up with about 10 different apps on my phone, offering all of these services. And I had to enter my code details and take my code pictures for every single one of those apps. It was a bit...
Not efficient.
Not efficient, exactly.
Yeah.
So when it comes to enabling consumers to actually be fully circular, right, we probably should provide them a little bit easier way of doing it.
And the technology is there for that.
Exactly.
And Nikita, I think you could talk about that as well, because one of the brands or entities that is supported by the Mills Fabrica's investment arm is a company called Provenance, who are known in fashion particularly for partnering with Ganni, haven't they?
Yeah, so Provenance is a blockchain company who could basically verify and trace all the information and data that is given by the companies down to, let's say, the field and the cotton that was put into the garments and the living wages of the people working on that farm. So it can give you the provenance going all the way down to the the start point. But I think the key point there is just having transparency in the beginning. Not all the time everything is perfect, but it's a stepping stone in the correct direction. So once you have the transparency and people can pull it apart, then you can start addressing and producing your garments responsibly and correctly.
That makes sense. And I suppose, Paola, the question for you guys as well is that obviously you have various products that help preserve the life and the integrity of a garment. And in future, do you see that there could be a way to using this kind of technology we're talking about to give the consumer the ability with a simple QR code or some other device that shows them, here's how you can build in longevity to the items you own by washing them at less temperatures, for example, or here's how to launder them, here's how, what do you feel about that?
I think it's fundamental because there are two elements there. I think the first one is on the consumer side, there is currently little motivation to rewear their garments for longer because there's actually this real need, emotional need about newness of the wardrobes, which is basically, we are craving for new. So then when it comes into education, there is a big part in terms of how we make consumers aware of what are the options available, because we're not asking them to stop buying. It's about rethinking how, what your wardrobe can look like in different terms. And I think when it comes into wearing, for example, getting more wear out of the garments, our research points out that they just basically don't know how to do it. They are telling us, I just feel I have the skills or the capabilities, and we have seen very nice campaigns out there like 30 words, but then if you're a regular citizen and you're not a fashion blogger, then it's just like you just don't know how to do it right. So there's really ways to how we use these digital passports to engage consumers into actually moving from sustainability awareness into real adoption. There's also a lot of things that we continue to do as consumers and as citizens wrong. Like, we want perfect whites, right? Like, you want your shoes to look perfectly white, your clothes as well. And we are basically boiling our garments because we just go on 60 degrees, 90 degrees, and and that's not very sustainable. So also when it comes into, like Tanya was saying, like, can we really educate consumers about this particular garment? What are the care products I should use? Which is the type of laundry washing habits that I can use so I can actually stain the lives of clothes for longer. And currently, a regular breed uses a t-shirt for 4 years and then discard it. So actually, by using the right care products and washing at low temperatures, we can actually double the life of these garments. And we know that if we extend the life of garments, we can actually cut the carbon footprint. So there's many, many ways on how this can actually, as I said before, move consumers into awareness, to adoption, and this is when we will be able to really create the new circular fashion behaviors as a norm, thus helping to really transform the fashion industry.
So it's basically about bringing all these information systems into one place just to make it really simple, bite-sized, digestible, and ultimately, hopefully, either entertaining or engaging as a process, right? So it doesn't
Absolutely,
feel
because also when you think of circular fashion behaviors, we talk about all these apps, but then consumers are just drowning in a sea of options. We see every single new app and platform popping up, which is great because this is what will enable, but can this digital passport be also the door for consumers to actually go there and get the recommendations from the garments manufacturers? This is how you should resell or repair or where to go or even where to dispose. So it actually enables consumers to really adopt these circular fashion behaviors as a norm.
Yeah, that plays into extended producer responsibility, right? Like, you know, one of the things that came out in our research of this report was that in future one of the target states will be that wardrobes will be viewed as an asset class. And just like we now have this sharing economy for our homes with Airbnb, and in Los Angeles a while ago I was able to rent someone else's car because they were out of town using technology, that in future with the rental market and the resale market, you will, with the help of products like Vanish and everything else we've talked about, look after those items you buy because you want to retain their value, because you might want to sell them on, or just make them last longer for you, or just rent them when you know you're not going to use them. So with wardrobes as an asset class, I guess, Tanya, my question to you is, how can technology and potentially a QR code probably in the early stages, and then maybe later on, Nikita, I'd like to hear from you about RFIDs and NFCs, how they work. How can these technologies enable fashion to treat their items as assets as opposed to disposable? What would you say?
Yeah, absolutely great question. I mean, primarily it's an education tool about what is currently, the most popular thing to talk about, which is the materials that are used, recycled cotton and local manufacturing, and Patrick, you've done a fantastic job on that. And but equally, we could talk about the rental price of those garments, the resale price of those garments, because the market has already advanced enough to understand, an average cocktail dress price, the little black dress of Saint Laurent or Dior, etc. We could also communicate the CO2 emissions savings, perhaps, that the manufacturer has achieved by choosing more sustainable suppliers. And we could also talk about how much more you as a customer, as a consumer, can do to achieve savings through the use and end-of-life stage. There's a lot, and we can talk about it in an absolutely human language. Not your greenhouse gas protocols and EU Green Deals, all that stuff that is not familiar to average consumer at all. Product passport is where brand actually talks in a much more visual and exciting, almost gamifying language, right? Where you could tell them, you know what, you could beat Kim Kardashian on your wardrobe impact if you wanted to, and here's how to do it. There's a lot of stories that you could tell. And what is also exciting about product passports is because they could be placed on blockchain, and this is an entirely different conversation, but equally you could trace manufacturing, use stage, end of life stage, and the second life and the third life when it comes to, when it gets sold to a third user of that product, to the fourth user of the product. And then you actually can quantify how many lives that product has lived and what is actual CO2 emissions that has gone into cradle to death, rather than just cradle to the point of sale.
Got it. Thank you very much. And Nikita, you were speaking to me earlier about RFID and NFCs from your time at Avery Dennison. Do you think these will play a role in this? I mean, QR codes, thanks partly to the pandemic, and restaurants have become a little bit more mainstream, but what are your thoughts on RFIDs and NFCs?
I think QR codes are great for the consumer to scan it, but I think if we're talking about end-of-life garments, we really probably need a washable NFC, which is at a low price point, because to basically take every garment and pull out a label and look what it's made out of, or scan it at let's say a production level of recycling or upcycling, is so time consuming that it becomes too expensive to actually do. But if everything can be dumped in, and say you've got a digital passport which is a washable NFC, then everything can be in a box, and you can just sort it all out by just literally passing it over a sort of scanner which reads it, and know that that's 50% cotton, 50% polyester, that's 100% cotton, so that goes to Renew Cell, for example. So I think it's the cost, and it's what the brands are willing to pay, because I know when I was dealing with Avery Dennison a while back, I think the cost of an NFC chip was 20 cents, which sounds pretty cheap to us, but actually that cost needs to come down to probably 1 cent to make it affordable for what the brands want. So it's bringing that cost down, and I think that will change the whole entire market. And again, NFCs also interactive with a mobile phone. So consumers can interact with it as well as when it's getting processed at a manufacturing level as well.
Right, thank you very much. And Patrick, we talked to you during the process of authoring this report to really kind of drill down into how technology can help engage the consumer to do their bit in tandem with the manufacturer or the retailer. And I think you mentioned something about storytelling, didn't you? What were your thoughts on that? About, is this not just data? Is it Tanya mentioned that, the gamification of it, and
yes.
how do you incentivize a consumer? How do you engage with this process so they don't feel they've got yet another piece of technology to interact with?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about how you communicate it, right? That's kind of the whole point of fashion. It's storytelling, especially on the luxury side of things. And so, just like anything, you can present it in a really boring, dry way, or you can present it in a really amazing kind of way that takes the consumer on a journey of where it started and where it ended, and that could either be animated or not, or it could be hand drawn or illustrated. It could be really beautiful. We documented when we did my collection for February 2020 Fashion Week was a swap shop of pieces donated by some people in this room and British Fashion Council designers and members, and we documented all those pieces with QR codes, and it was really amazing to kind of tell that story through saying this once belonged to this person and now it's yours and you're wearing it for this day of Fashion Week, and the next day you're swapping it with someone else and wearing or maybe you've customized yours and you've logged that on your ownership of the blockchain, and so you can really tell personal stories through clothes with this technology, and I think that's incredibly exciting.
I suppose the experience is a bit like the difference of being in a restaurant with an open kitchen to driving through at McDonald's, isn't it? Like, you engage more if you can see how it was done, and
And I've always thought with brands, and it's something I say when I work with brands, if you're not willing to put everything that you do when you make your clothes on a big TV screen, then there's probably something wrong with the things that you're doing.
Very good point. And Paola, in future, do you think there's a way in which with these NFCs and things like this, that the washing machine could, you could hold your garment up next to the washing machine, maybe they might say, okay, I know what this is, here's how to wash it, perhaps that's a...
Well, I was recently in Germany in the IFA innovation, where you are actually start to see where some of the washing machines are going to. And it was very interesting to see, because consumers are engaging with technology. We know that. Technology is actually an enabler. So I guess going back to your question is, if consumers can understand that this is about nudging them into how to actually properly deliver those more sustainable laundry practices, then that's what we need to do. Because driving consumer behaviors is really hard. Yeah. Detergents have been calling out for more than 20 years that you should wash at cold temperatures, but still, in the average regular UK consumers, you're still using 45 degrees average, right? So that tells a lot of consumer behavior, where we are not really just going down all the way to 20 degrees and doing so. So this is where the washing machine manufacturers can actually play a huge role, because even from the nudging point of view, when you go to default in washing machines is 40 degrees today. So there's a fundamental radical shift that needs to happen as well in the whole industry. The whole laundry industry needs to really redefine all of these, and this is where digital QR codes can play, and NFCs and all these gamification can play a huge role into really nudging, because we need to nudge consumers.
We do, especially in the cost of living crisis, because that's the motivation too, if for nothing else, just to bring your energy bill down. And I think we're probably at time. Thank you very, very much to all my panelists. And thank you again, especially to Vanish, for helping us do this report.